Alright, so, death meditation. I want to talk first about what I expect to, or what I hope to get out of this. So, I don't know, the idea of thinking about death more, like, it seems like it could be very useful. And I guess it still remains to be seen if that's the case, but what I hope to get out of it is an appreciation for life, right? Like, I think that's a pretty, I don't know, easy conclusion or an easy thing to hope for when you start thinking about death more. But also, I think, like, I'd like to spend less time doing things that don't matter and don't actually make me happy, and more time doing things that do. I'd like to venture more, right? I would say risk more, but I mean, like, venture more, like try more things, and not wait, right? I think I'd love to procrastinate less regarding the things that are important to me, like different projects I want to do, places I want to see, experiences I want to have, achievements I want to try, ideas that I want to try to pursue. I think even vlogging here is an example of that, right? It's something that I've been wanting to do for a long, long time and have never pulled the trigger. So I'd like to have more of those experiences in my life. And I think the idea of contemplating death, and I think when you contemplate death, what you're really contemplating is impermanence, which is also like a Buddhist principle, that nothing lasts, right? That even your life, your mind, your consciousness is all going to end someday. And so that's a bit of what I'd like to get out of it. And I think, and today, that was some of the insight there, was this idea of impermanence, right? And it's interesting that, and because as I would visualize, I'd visualize death pretty far off. It had two effects today, I think. One was helping me just relax, right? When you picture your life, the scope of a lifetime, right? It's easier to let go of the little things that are stressing you out, worrying you each day. And I think that's what stress tends to do, right? It makes you so focused on your immediate needs that, but the reality is when you look at these things at a larger scope, it's really not that big of a deal if you go, or if certain things just lose their punch, right? When you observe them in perspective. So that's one insight that I think I took away today. Another one was just this idea of impermanence, right? That nothing is going to last. And I think that helps you appreciate the moment, and it makes you realize that the only thing of value is the present moment, right? So those are some of the insights. But I want to talk more about this idea of how to have an accurate view of reality. So yesterday we left off listening to this personality type podcast, and spoiler alert, Myers-Briggs, there's not a lot of like concrete evidence supporting it, which is kind of devastating in a way. But I did talk about another personality test called the Big Five. I need to research that more. I've heard of it before, but I haven't really looked into it. And I haven't seen how it compares to Myers-Briggs. But so I kind of feel a bit like a little kid who's just devastated that his toy is broken. But then mom promises, oh, we'll buy you another one. We'll buy you a better one. And then I'm okay, right? Just need a new idea to fill the void. So I'm going to pursue this Big Five thing. We'll see where that leads. And hopefully there's no, hopefully it's a little more of a stable idea. A more, hopefully that is a more accurate view of reality. But I've been thinking a lot about how to kind of inoculate yourself against some of these traps that we fall into of of believing wrong things. And I personally do believe that it is valuable to have an accurate view of reality. And so if that is your goal, I talked a little bit about yesterday, but yesterday I mentioned just shedding labels, right? And trying not to identify too heavily with any sort of label. So for example, if you identify as being a left in politics or even right politics, conservative or liberal, any sort of label you hold on to makes you less able to objectively view ideas, because they can bring your identity into question, right? But related to this, I think, is to not put labels on others, right? And to not and to strive to not have opinions of organizations, of even individuals, right? But don't have opinions of organizations or individuals, but only just assess their ideas, right? So for example, I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump. And so it makes me so susceptible to just buy into any sort of hatred of any idea that he presents, right? It's not impossible that he could come up with something that's a good idea. And it's likely that if he did, this just shows you how biased I am. If he did or does, I'd be very unlikely to acknowledge that that's a good idea. So another thing that this happens all the time, we give people these labels, and even for example, Fox News, I think, is a very biased organization, but that's my bias towards them. Or any sort of conservative politician, even Ben Shapiro. My dad, I think, mentioned him, some of what he was saying. And I listen to his stuff and I can feel this bias that I have, wanting to hate every word that comes out of his mouth. And that clearly is a hindrance in my ability to have an accurate view of reality. Because if he comes up with good ideas, those ideas should be evaluated on their own merits instead of this bias, right? And I think that's an important part of having real discussions and making real progress, right? Ideas should be evaluated in their own sphere outside of our own opinions of the people or sources of those ideas. Obviously there's some exceptions regarding facts, right? So for example, reputation of a news outlet or whatever, if they have a reputation for misrepresenting the truth, obviously that should be taken into account. But when it comes from ideas, we should try to evaluate ideas as if we don't know the source, right? And evaluate each idea on its own merit. And another thing about this is, first of all, we should be very wary of any ideas that we want to be true, or any stories that support ideas that we want to be true. We should always be carefully watching for our own biases and using that as a counterweight to anything we see. We should try to lean into ideas that we disagree with, that we don't want to be true, right? And then related to that is just humility, right? We should always be willing to be wrong, to admit that we're wrong, to concede good points that the opposition makes. And I think, this is obviously not a comprehensive list, but I do believe it's a valuable thing to have an accurate view of reality, and I think these are some ways that we can do that. So, all right, that's all for today. Peace.